Well, hi everyone. I'm so thankful that you all are here. My name is Alicia, and I am a doc student at Western Michigan University studying evaluation, measurement, and research. And today, my presentation is going to be about how you can get the most out of your online strategic planning tool while using technical soundness to meet your program goals. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And before we do that, I'm actually going to have us take a step back and remember our why. Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Why are we planning? Why do we have 6 hours with facilitators? And that is because we are operating under a continuous improvement model. And that why is so important to plan, to implement that plan, then to evaluate that plan, evaluate where we are, and then do it all again next year. And as we continuously improve, when we move through this cyclical process, we are hopefully moving towards improving our programs and in turn improving our outcomes and improving outcomes for students with unique abilities. So that being said, as we continuously move through this process, we are hopefully also moving toward these objectives that the center has provided. So students are increasing their skill attainment in academic, employment, and occupational skills in their selected programs of study. They are earning meaningful credential industry certifications relevant to their career goals and also their program of study, and that they are students who successfully complete the program will obtain an employment aligned with their area of career preparation. So this is our why. This is our why. This is why we are doing this every year. This is how we go through this improvement process. And so I want to start off where this little box is here. And we start off, maybe you did this in team planning 1, maybe you carried this over into your second team planning session this afternoon, but hopefully you sat down, you gathered your team in this time. It was virtual, sometimes it's in person and physical, but you gathered your team, you did a pulse check, and you assessed your status where you were at. And you kind of listed out a description of where you were, listed out your strengths, and listed out your current needs, and assessed them against all of the evidence-based and promising practices in the online strategic planning tool. So hopefully this is what you did. You assessed your status, you looked at all of the domains, maybe you looked at some of the domains, maybe you focused in on a few benchmarks, and maybe you focused in on multiple benchmarks, but you were at that point assessing where you were at. And then after you do that, you then hopefully moved into creating a yearly plan. And this is what we're going to focus in on today. This is what we're going to focus in on, how to improve that planning process and move things forward. And so you do that under step 3 of make a plan. You have figured out where your benchmarks are that you're going to focus on. You looked at your strengths and needs. You determined what benchmarks were going to be a priority and which benchmarks were maybe not a priority this year and something that you'll look at maybe in years to come. And then you said, yep, we're going to make a plan around this specific benchmark. And so you looked at that and you wrote a goal under that specific benchmark. And then you clicked edit plan or make a plan and moved into establishing your activities and your outcomes from that. So why is this important that we talk about how to improve our planning process? And It's important because what we noticed was that plans with higher ratings of what is called technical soundness were more likely to reach their goals at the end of the year. And this was done by a study by Dr. Gothberg and Dr. Kohler, and they looked at a variety of state plans and local plans. And this is what they found at a significant level of 0.0002. So this is why it's so important that we focus in on improving our strategic planning process so that in turn, we can improve our goals as teams and as programs, and then reach those ultimate goals at the end of the year. So now let's get into the meat of the presentation and hopefully the purpose and what you will learn as we go through this. The purpose of this presentation is fourfold. The first is to increase your knowledge on what defines technical soundness. And so we'll go through that definition together. And then it's to increase your knowledge of technically sound elements. And we'll walk through all of those components of technical soundness and look through how those align with the online strategic planning goal. And then we're actually going to do a workshop. So be prepared to be interactive and engaged later on in the session. And so we're going to grab your working goals that you've established or that you're working on in your team planning sessions and look for ways on how we can improve how they're written for your annual plans. And hopefully this will increase the likelihood for achieving your goals come June 30th, 2022. So here is our agenda. We're going to talk about what is technical soundness, followed by the components of technical soundness. Then we're going to talk about how the center is conducting technical soundness and then do a workshop on your team goals. So what is a technically sound plan? A technically sound plan includes a goal that addresses a relevant need that you have as a team. It's linked to an evidence-based or promising practice and is related to an expected outcome that you wish to see. So as we were talking through, that cycle at the beginning and the steps that you're taking during your team planning time, you are hopefully writing a goal that you've identified as a priority for your team, as a priority for this year, and you've linked it to a benchmark under a specific domain. And these are all of your evidence-based and promising practices. This is where the linkage occurs. And that goal is then related to an expected outcome that your team wishes to see by completing all of the tasks and all the outputs and complete your outcome at the end of the year. A technically sound plan also articulates the link between the tasks or activities that you as a team are going to complete, a person responsible from your team who will hold the team accountable for completing those activities, and a projected completion date, as well as the outputs that you will have as a result of completing those activities. And again, these are aligned with your anticipated outcomes that you wish to see at the end of the year. And by doing this, by aligning a goal to a specific evidence-based practice that you've determined as a priority, by establishing all the activities that you're going to do throughout the year, who on your team is going to ensure that those activities get done, and you've thought about a feasible projected deadline for each of those tasks. You've outlined all of the outputs that will be a product of completing those activities, and then you have established your intended outcome. This all provides you with an accountability framework in the form of planning for a sound evaluation and useful results. And that goes back to that cyclical process that I mentioned in the beginning of first we plan, then we implement so that we can evaluate at the end of the year. All right, these are all the components of technical soundness. And what you will notice is these are also all of the components from the online strategic planning tool that were purposely put in there so that you all could think through these steps and think through how they will move you all forward. And so you have a goal that you write out, followed by a list of activities, followed by the outputs, a person responsible, a projected completion date, and then your outcomes section actually has 3 spots. You put in your outcomes, followed by an indicator, which we'll go through that, and then followed by a data source. So you've gone through the assessment process, you've assessed your status. Maybe some of you as teams are here, maybe you are not after your second team planning time, but hopefully you've identified a benchmark that you see as a priority for your team and you've articulated a goal in which you wish to see at the end of the year. And so what we want to see in this box here is that the goal is articulated as an outcome, so something you can measure, and it's not a task, it's not an activity, it's not an output or a product. So again, the goal is articulated as an outcome. Let's go through some examples. So a great example would be by the end of each semester, all incoming students will participate in person-centered planning aligned with students' career goals. So this is something that we can measure, that every single student that enters the program, they're going to go through person-centered planning, and we can align those person-centered plans to their career goals. Another example would be increase student access and use financial aid as needed to support their program enrollment and completion. Again, something we can measure is an increase in student access by using all of the additional resources, and hopefully that will support their program enrollment as well as completion. One more example would be to increase student participation in community-based internships. So maybe you've had a variety of activities in which you've established a variety of community-based internships, and now the goal is to increase participation in those internships. So you've written your task as a team, and now is the time where you think through all of the activities that you are going to complete in order to reach that goal. So the goal that I had listed here was that our students demonstrate self-determination skills. And this goal was aligned with 1.2 in terms of the benchmarks. And so now that potentially we'll pretend I'm on a team, my team has identified this as a goal. Now we would like to identify a list of all the activities we are going to complete by the end of the year to say, yep, our students demonstrate self-determination skills. So we're going to think through those things and provide a really detailed task list. And here is an example. Number 1, identify appropriate self-determination tool. That's our first step. And then we're going to administer that self-determination assessment tool. Now that we've administered it, we're going to review the data and identify students' self-determination strengths and needs. And then we're going to identify and develop strategies to address and improve specific needs. And then we'll skip to number 6. Then we can implement improvement strategies. And then we can monitor implementation of strategies monthly. So be thinking as you're in your team planning sessions that you have listed a sufficient number of activities, a sufficient number of tasks in order to say, yep, we've met that goal at the end of the year. And again, here are just some examples that I listed off. All right, now we get to the output section. And your output section should be related to each of your tasks that you listed. So these are tangible outputs identified for every single task. And here's a list of examples. So I mentioned that our first task as a team was to identify an appropriate self-determination tool. So as a result of completing that task, our output as a team will be a self-determination tool. For number 2, the activity was to administer the self-determination assessment tool. And therefore, the output or the result of completing that task will be a self-determination assessment data. Number 3, if our task is to review the data to identify student self-determination strengths and needs, then our output would be a document of each student's strengths and needs. All right, I am going to pause here to see if there are any questions in terms of outputs or anything in the chat that I'm missing.
Nothing in the chat, just the availability of this session later.
Okay, great. Okay, let's move on to the next element of technical soundness. And this is identifying a person responsible. So this is a specific team member's name and or title of a team title is identified for completing each task. So again, this isn't necessarily the person who will, so sometimes what I see in this box here is that teams will think about, well, we need to collaborate with this person, or this person as well needs to be a part of this decision or this task completion. But really what we want to see here is that a specific team member's name is listed by each of these tasks. And this is who is going to hold your team responsible for heading up these tasks. It also provides a shared ownership. So not one person is in charge of so many tasks. You can divide it up. For instance, I put the people from the center in here. So Janice is in charge of identifying the self-determination tool and administering the assessment for that. And then Drew's in charge of reviewing all of that data. And then Janice is going to identify and develop strategies for each of the students and then develop plans to address student self-determination needs. And then Iris will be in charge of implementation and then monitoring that implementation. So you can see how you can share ownership across the team just by dividing up tasks. The next element is a projected completion date. So what we want to see here is that a specific date is identified for the completion of each of these tasks. And in addition to that, pushing you all a little bit further and asking, is this date feasible? You all know that the academic year has its ebbs and flows where things are crazy and then things have maybe a little bit more of a slower pace, but you know where those increases are and where you can accomplish more and maybe where you can't accomplish as much. So think about, are these dates feasible? Can we actually complete this activity by a set time? And that's really important for you all to think about. So again, here's just a closer table to view with a 1-to-1 ratio of the tasks identified as well as the projected completion dates. Right, the last thing that you do is identify your outcomes, your indicators, and your data sources. So an outcome that you list here is articulated as a change in something. So a change in knowledge, maybe first. And then once you change knowledge, maybe you can change behavior. And then once you change behavior, maybe you can change condition. So think of it as a change that you wish to see by completing all of the tasks that you've listed above. For instance, my overarching goal was that students demonstrate self-determination skills. And so in my outcome, I'm going to take this a step further and say that students demonstrate an increase in self-determination skills in their courses. And that's what we're going to focus on. Here's a list of other examples that I've actually pulled from past plans. And so I wanted to share them with you. One of the outcome examples is that you're going to increase faculty knowledge for using universal design in their courses. So again, something that you can measure, and expected outcome is a change in knowledge. Another example would be that students gain independent living skills for off-campus housing. The third one would be students will meet minimum standards for assignment completion. And then the last one is that this program would like to increase enrollment to 15 students per year. So again, an expected outcome that you wish to see. The next thing that you all input into the tool is your indicator. And your indicators are your units of measurement that identify progress towards the outcome. So if I want to demonstrate an increase in self-determination skills, if I want students to demonstrate an increase in self-determination skills in their courses, then how I'm going to measure that is by a number of students who request support in academic areas. So that's how I'm going to measure that. Going along with our pulled examples here, if I want to increase faculty knowledge, then I'm going to measure that by potentially the number of faculty who complete training in UD concepts. If I want students to gain independent living skills for off-campus housing, I can measure that by the percentage of students living independently after they complete their program. If I want to have students meet minimum standards for assignment completion, I will measure that by the percentage of assignments completed. And last but not least, if I want to increase enrollment to 15 students per year, I'm going to measure that by the number of students we have enrolled. The last thing that you input is your data source. So these are sources that you've identified that will provide evidence of progress toward the outcome. Following our examples again, if I want to have a measurement of the number of faculty who complete training in UD concepts, then where am I going to get that data? And do I have access to that data? So think about that as you're going through these, is you need the number of faculty. Maybe we can get this from our webinar attendance records. An example from the next one is the percentage of students living independently after the completion of their program. Again, where are you going to get that number? Number two, do you have access to it? And so an example could be a post-program follow-up survey that you send out to your students. Another example would be the percentage of assignments completed. And so a data source could be your Canvas course assignments or a checklist of completion for all the assignments for the month. And last but not least, if you want to measure the number of students enrolled, a data source could be program enrollment database. All right, again, I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions as we move forward before we get into the workshop time together.
No, not yet.
I do have a quick question. So just, you said something earlier. So for every task that has been written into the plan, there's got to be an output for that? Okay.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes teams collapse these. Like I was working with a team today, they had a variety of tasks that they listed. And then they said, well, tasks 1 through 5, that is all for a submission, like for program approval. So all of these tasks we're going to do, and the output is we are going to submit our program application. What I also, yeah, if it is also helpful, sometimes what I've noticed is you can number your tasks, and then align that to the corresponding outputs. So number one is this activity, and therefore the output for number one is this. And that's sometimes helpful to get that 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, any other questions before I move forward? All right. Okay, so how is the center conducting technical soundness? So the center is using what's called a technical soundness tool, and it is a tool that is used to evaluate and improve your strategic planning in order to help you reach your goals by the end of the year. And so what this does is the Excel document actually inputs all of the information that you put into the online strategic planning tool. And then they have an evaluator go through each of these elements listed here. So goal, tasks, outputs, etc. And they do a quality check for each of these components. And then the evaluator can go through and give a categorical response and say, yes, this team met this quality check. This team partially met the quality check, or no, they did not. If it's applicable and appropriate, then you can also have an area in which the team is provided improvement or comments for how they can improve in that given area. Okay. All right, if there are no further questions, I'm going to move on to the workshop portion, in which we are going to dig in to our current working goals and get some feedback. And so what we are going to do is I'm first going to allow you just time to open up the online strategic planning tool. And you can go to www.transitionprogramtool.org. And then when you get logged in, if you can go under your current active plan and then go to dashboard. Under dashboard, you will find a selection that says go to step 3. And if you have any current working goals in there, you can copy and paste them either to a Word document or a notebook, or physically write them on a sheet of paper, but I want you to have visual access to them. So as we wait for teams, if anyone is having trouble accessing their goals or needs some assistance in accessing that, please let us know. And if you are ready to go, if you could put something in the chat, that would be helpful. Awesome, thanks, Joe. And facilitators, you can do this too. You may not be able to answer all of the questions I have on the next slide, but you could answer potentially some of them. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next slide here. And what we're going to do with this time together, and Joe, if you're willing to share your goals, that would be great. But first, we'll just kind of allow each of you to do a self-assessment of your goals right now using these 4 questions. So take some time to reflect. I'm going to go through each of these. And again, facilitators, feel free to answer these as well. in terms of what your teams are working on. So number one, is your team's goal aligned with an evidence-based or promising practice from the taxonomy? In other words, is your team's goal aligned with a specific benchmark under a specific domain? Number two, is your team's goal a need? Is it a priority for these next 7-8 months? Number three, are you as a team able to complete this goal by the end of the year? And when I say the end of the year, I mean by June 30th, 2022. So is this something that you can achieve by June 30th, 2022? And if not, that's okay. We can work on revising and wordsmithing, or maybe not, eating the entire pie, as some of my professors would say, maybe just tackling a crumb of the pie. And then the last thing is your team's goal articulated as an outcome versus a task, activity, or output? Is your team's goal articulated as an outcome versus a task, activity, or output? Okay. So what I was going to have us do, but since we only have a few participants here, maybe what we can do together as a group with the 7 of us is have our breakout sharing session here. And so what I would like to do is, if you're comfortable, you can unmute yourself and come on screen and share your current working goal or goals. Share your benchmark that's aligned with your team goal. And if you answered no to any of the self-assessment questions, what things do you see that your team needs to maybe discuss in your next planning session to think about how you can answer yes? So if anyone is willing to share, that would be great.
I'm not sure I'll be the best one to share. We're a brand new program,
Yes.
and we won't have students until second semester. And it looks like when I was looking at the plan in the planning tool, the changes that we made today were not in there. So I need to talk to Dale. So, but I can tell you some of the things that we have done. I mean, what do you want to hear from somebody that's got kids?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can go ahead, Janice.
No, I was going to probably say what you're going to say is whatever, because you all have been planning, and so
we've made some progress. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And I have been working with a team that their goal was just to submit an application. So everyone's at different stages, and if you feel comfortable sharing, that's great. And if not,
sure. Let me get back on the yeah, there we are. Okay, so I'm looking at the one with stars on it. So the goal was students pursue an inclusive program. And so where we are right now is we have our program director, we have our teacher in here as of this week, and we are in the process of open house, sending out letters, and hoping to start second semester with a group of about 10. So we are, what we talked about today when we were kind of adjusting our plan and adding some things to it, was to, go full force with the marketing and talking to teachers and try to just go ahead and start making a plan to have more students next year to find those people. Am I looking at 1.1? Is that what you're wanting to hear? Like where did we mark ourselves on the extent implemented?
Do you potentially have a written goal around that benchmark?
There is one. It says students pursue an inclusive program of study that aligns with their personal, academic, and career goals and interests as established through person-centered planning that includes the use of existing and or new relevant assessments.
Okay.
So that's 1.1. Is that a goal, or is that?
If you've written it as a goal, would you be willing to actually copy and paste it into the chat so we can see it?
So how do I? Let's see.
I think that's the actual benchmark, Alicia, in the tool.
Yeah,
okay.
It may be, yeah. And so,
like word for word.
I went into make a plan. Is that where we are? Create goals and identify strategies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I need to show goals. That's what I need to do. I'm sorry. Here we are.
No,
hey,
I'm
okay. Awake now. Okay. So our students enroll in a program of study aligned with their goals developed through person-centered planning. And that we have another one that students demonstrate self-determination skills. So okay, so students demonstrate self-determination skills again. So that is very similar to the plan that I shared today in terms of a goal, and something that I think you can definitely measure. Where I would ask questions on is, are you able to do that come June 30th, 2022? I think we will be able
to show that.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
We have not, we're about halfway through kind of setting curriculum and that kind of thing, and being able to measure the self-determination skills. So that'll come as we work through this second semester, but we should have data at the end of the year.
Hey, thank you for sharing, Joe.
You're welcome. It was I'm sorry I was slow to get going there.
That's okay.
So the question was, how did you rate it when you looked at the self-assessment that Alicia had?
How did we rate ours?
How did you rate it as you looked at her kind of?
Oh, the questions?
Yes.
Looking at the questions,
so it looks like you have self-determination, which is the evidence-based and promising practice. And
it is aligned, right?
Okay.
And I think our goal is a need, and we will be able to complete it by June 30th. And I think it's articulated as an outcome versus a task.
For sure.
What did you think when you heard it?
Yes, that's what I heard. Students demonstrate self-determination skills.
Okay.
Yep.
All
so
right,
it's not
on the right track. Okay.
Yes, you are on the right track. And it's not articulated as an activity like identifying or creating or so that seems like something you can measure at the end of the year.
Right, because that would be the tasks that you just mentioned.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Right. Anyone else willing to share? Otherwise, I have some goals that we can kind of discuss and look through.
I'll share what we came up with in the team, and I'm a facilitator. So let me go in. Do you want me to drop in the chat box?
That'd be great if we could see it.
To read it. Okay, give me a moment. Then let me go in and see if I can copy it. All right, so this is the goal. We go to copy. Let me do a big screen here. Full screen, that way I can. Yes. I don't think I have access to be able to. Oh, chat, here we go. Yeah. All right, let me see. Paste. Enter. Okay.
There it is. Okay, so what I have here is given assistance in planning with a job developer or coach or other staff members. 80% of SOAR students will achieve employment.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's go through those self-assessment questions. And maybe as the facilitator, you might not be able to identify if it's a need necessarily, but is it aligned with an evidence-based and promising practice?
I think so. I'm not sure.
What benchmark is it under?
It is under, let me go back. Okay, let me escape a little bit. It's under faculty and staff focused domain 2.0. But step 3A, create goals. Well, is that the right? Okay. I think it's 2.0, faculty staff focused domain.
Okay, that's the domain, yeah.
Yeah, is that right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and then is there a benchmark underneath that you would align that you wrote this goal under?
I'm sure there is. Let me go back in and see. Benchmark. Okay. Hold on. Let me go back to assessment. All right. So the benchmark, I believe, was 1.1. I think it's 1. I think so.
Okay.
When you're looking at the benchmark, if you're looking under the student domain, the student focused domain, it might be 1.
Oh, sorry, it's the wrong one. I'm under the wrong one. I'm sorry. All right. I think it's 2.2. Faculty staff ensure service, learning, and social academic environments are accessible to support all learners. I believe that's the one.
Okay.
On that 2.2. One, yeah.
Okay, so I would, yeah, because what I'm seeing here in terms of this goal is that 80% of SOAR students will achieve employment. So this to me sounds like a goal around a benchmark in which students will attain employment following their program completion. So look to see if that specific goal that you have written is aligned with a benchmark that is talking about students gaining employment. The other thing, so looking at step 3 under the question would be, are you able to complete this by the end of the year? Again, you may not know whether your team is able to do that, so you don't know what's on their plate necessarily, but just kind of ask them questions about, hey, is this something that you can achieve by June 30th? Or is this something that maybe needs to be a smaller goal that we can accomplish in the next 8 months, right? So I'm assuming that maybe their students are already enrolled in the program. They maybe have students that are completing their program in hopes that they are then looking for jobs and will have employment come June 30th. So push back on those questions with your team and say like, hey, is this something that we can achieve by then? And if so, great. Let's continue to think through all the activities that we need to do that are aligned with this goal. And then last but not least, is this team's goal articulated as an outcome? So I see at the end of this, after the comma, because it seems like in the first half of it that you're talking about all the things that you're going to do. So you're going to give assistance and planning with a job developer or coach and other staff members. And in turn, that action or that thing that you're going to do as a group or as a team is then going to have the outcome of 80%, there's your indicator for you, of your SOAR students will achieve employment. Great.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay. So I would just like to encourage you all as you're thinking through your last team planning session is really thinking, is this articulated as an outcome? Is this articulated like something that we can measure at the end of the year? What we sometimes trip up on is when we're thinking and planning is like, oh, we need to create this and we need to identify that. And really those are your tasks in activities in your outputs. And so I want to go back to a previous slide here of some examples of goals that are not identified or not articulated as an outcome. So this would be establish person-centered planning. Great, that is an activity. That's an activity that you as a team are going to do. And again, I would push you a little bit further in saying, why do you want to establish person-centered planning? What's your why behind that? What do you wish to accomplish at the end? Another non-example would be, well, we're going to evaluate the existing MOUs and analyze for replication for new partnership development. And again, I would say that's a great activity for you all to do. That's a great task. But why are you doing that? What's the step further behind why you want to evaluate the existing MOUs? And then the third one, so another action word here, or an activity, develop a proposal for multiple faculty development presentations. So again, an activity that you're doing, an action item that you're doing as a team. And as a facilitator, I would sit down and say, great, that's a great start to a goal, but why? Why are you developing a proposal for multiple faculty development presentations? And then the last example that I have is work with legal counsel to develop release of information. Again, an activity or a task that I would see. And going further and answering the question is, what's the purpose of this task? What do you wish to see by completing this task? And what's your goal that you wish to attain at the end of the year? All right. So thank you all for sharing out. What I would say is, now that you're thinking about your goal and you're thinking about all those questions that we did a self-assessment on earlier, like, is it aligned to a specific evidence-based and promising practice? Otherwise known as, is it aligned to a specific benchmark in the taxonomy or in the online strategic planning tool? Is it a need that your team will need for this coming year? The third one is, can you complete it by June 30th, 2022? And the last one is, can you measure it? Is it articulated as an outcome? So once you think through these things, what I then want you to do is start looking forward and thinking about, are your tasks sufficient to accomplishing your goal? Because sometimes we get into planning sessions and we list all of our tasks, and then we look up and say, oh, these were the tasks that we want to complete, but they don't align with our overall arching goal that we wish to see at the end of the year. And that's okay. Sometimes we just need to go back and revise our goal or revise our outcomes. I'm sorry, revise our activities so they align with our goal above. And then the other thing that I want you to look forward to and look at is this also aligned with the expected outcome that you wish to see at the end of the year? And is this measurable? Can I identify a unit of measure or an indicator? And then can I find a data source, or do I have access to a data source that is going to help us get that measurement? And again, it's aligned to our goal. Everything comes back to that whole linear thought that we had at the beginning, in which we are thinking through all of these steps and how they're related to one another. Okay. With that, I see that we have about 5 minutes left. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity for individuals to ask questions.
Got some good questions for people to think about and process through as they look at their plans. Good practice. Thank you.
I have a question about adjusting the plan? You said you could go in and adjust. Do you just do that at certain times, or do you do that all along? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right now,
you should really not mess with them once they're set, right? Or should?
Well, the way we have it is you plan, and it stays open for about a month after the PEPI.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we open it up again. Typically, we have a mid-year. We won't this time, but we'll open it back up like in the spring before the PEPI next year. And so you'll have it open two more times.
Okay. All right.
In addition to that, Joe, what I've noticed from some teams is that we will go back to other components in the plan. So sometimes we're, already to the outcome section, and then we're thinking through this a little bit more, and we're kind of having a conversation together as a team, or the team's having a conversation, and then they're like, oh, but this isn't aligned to what we've listed above. So now we need to go back through and either revise what we're writing in the outcome section in the moment, which is great, or revise some of the activities so we can get to an expected outcome. It really is, it just depends on where you are at in the process.
Okay. All right.
Good question though.
Yeah, great question. It is.
Yeah, even for, yeah, like even today, we had goals established and we got through our activities, and the team was like, I think we need to revise our goal. So we went back at the beginning and said, all right, let's make it more feasible, because we've looked at all of our activities and we're like, this is all we can do between now or after Thanksgiving and then June 30th. And so now let's dial back our goal a little bit more so that we can accomplish it.
That makes sense.
Well, this has been great. Thank you for the interaction and the great questions. And so, yes, we will post all of the sessions once we get through with the editing of them. Claudia is furiously working on them. So.
Thanks, Claudia.
As we go through.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you attending on a late Wednesday afternoon after a busy day. So I appreciate you taking the time to attend this session.